The cold didn't just bite, it chewed. It gnawed through wool and leather, settled into the marrow of the bone, and whispered that it would be easier to just close your eyes and sleep forever. But Sergeant Elias Thorne knew that sleep was the cousin of death, and in the Ardennes forest in December 1944, death didn't need any help finding you. Thorne adjusted the strap of his M1 Garand, the frozen leather creaking like an old door hinge in the absolute silence of the pre-dawn forest. Mist hung heavy and gray between the pine trees, reducing the world to a 10-yard radius of snow and shadows. To his left, Private Miller was shivering so violently that Thorne could practically hear the boy's teeth rattling against the silence. Miller was 19, fresh from a farm in Iowa, and had never seen a German soldier who wasn't already dead. Thorne, on the other hand, had dragged his boots through the mud of North Africa and the surf of Sicily. He knew the smell of trouble, and right now, the forest smelled of diesel and ozone. "Sarge," Miller whispered, the word barely a vapor cloud. "I swear I heard engines again." "Stow it," Thorne hissed, his eyes scanning the tree line. "Sound carries funny in the snow. Could be wind." But Thorne knew it wasn't wind. His squad, Echo 4, a reconnaissance element of the 99th Infantry Division, had been pushed far forward to the Losheim Gap. Their orders were to observe and report. The brass back in the rear believed the Germans were exhausted, defeated, reeling from the retreat across France. They called this sector a ghost front, a quiet place for green troops to get blooded and battered troops to rest. Thorne didn't buy it. The silence was too heavy. It was the kind of silence that comes right before a dam breaks. Beside them, Corporal Fixer O'Malley was fiddling with the SCR 300 radio backpack. The antenna whipped slightly in the breeze. "Static, Sarge, nothing but static. The atmosphere's chewing up the signal, or—" O'Malley paused, looking up, his face smeared with grease and grim. "Or they're jamming us." "Jamming?" Thorne crouched lower. "Who wastes resources jamming a quiet sector?" That was the question that turned the cold in Thorne's gut into a knot of dread. He signaled for the squad, 6 men in total, to move up the ridge. They moved like specters, boots wrapped in burlap to muffle the crunch of the snow. As they crested the rise, the mist momentarily parted, revealing the valley floor below. Miller gasped. Thorne clamped a hand over the kid's mouth, dragging him down into the snow. Below them, the world had turned gray and steel. It wasn't a patrol, it wasn't a company, it was an ocean of armor. Tiger II tanks, massive King Tigers with their 88mm cannons pointed west, sat idling, their engines rumbling a low frequency that vibrated the ground. Half-tracks, Kubowagens, and thousands of white-clad infantry, SS troops, judging by the camouflage smocks, were staging in the gloom. They weren't retreating, they were coiling to strike. "Mother of God," O'Malley whispered. "It's the whole damn Wehrmacht." Thorne realized with a jolt of horror that they were looking at the spearhead of a massive counteroffensive. If these tanks broke through the Losheim Gap, they would split the Allied armies in two, race for Antwerp, and potentially reverse the course of the war. And the Americans sleeping in their foxholes 5 miles back had no idea they were about to be hit by a tsunami of steel. "We need to call this in," Thorne said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline dumping into his blood. "Fixer, get me HQ." "I can't." O'Malley was frantically twisting dials. "It's not just atmospheric, it's a localized broad-spectrum jam. Someone is sitting on our frequency. As long as that jammer is active, we're ghosts. No one can hear us." Thorne looked down at the valley. In the center of the formation, near a commandeered stone farmhouse, a massive array of antennas spiked out of a specialized SDKF 251 command half-track. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by a perimeter of MG-42 nests. That was the source. It was a mobile electronic warfare unit, blinding American radios before the first shot was fired. Thorne looked at his men. They were cold, hungry, and outnumbered 1,000 to 1. They could retreat. They could slip back through the woods, try to outrun the tanks and warn the line personally, but by the time they made it back on foot through the deep snow, the artillery barrage would already have started. The surprise would be complete. "We can't outrun those tanks," Thorne said, pointing at the King Tigers, "and we can't call for help unless we shut down that half-track." Miller's eyes went wide. "Sarge, that's suicide. There's a whole battalion down there." "We don't need to fight the battalion," Thorne said, checking the action on his Garand. "We just need to kill the noise. If Fixer can get a clear signal for 30 seconds, he can call in the coordinates for a fat artillery strike right on this assembly area. We wake up our boys and we stop this breakout before it starts." The plan was madness. It required them to infiltrate the enemy encampment, destroy the jammer, and survive long enough to transmit. But the alternative was the slaughter of thousands of unsuspecting GIs. They moved down the ridge, all using the noise of the idling tank engines to mask their approach. The snow was their ally and their enemy. It hid them, but it slowed them. They slipped into the outskirts of the staging area, moving between parked trucks and sleeping soldiers huddled under tarps. The air smelled of bratwurst and unwashed bodies. It was surreal. They were walking through the belly of the beast. They reached a stone wall about 50 yards from the command half-track. The jammer was humming audibly now, a headache-inducing whine. 3 guards patrolled the perimeter of the vehicle. An officer in a black leather trench coat was standing by the vehicle, smoking a cigarette, looking at a map illuminated by a red flashlight. "Okay," Thorne whispered, "here's the play. Jackson and Miller, you take the left flank. Set up the bar, Browning automatic rifle. When I initiate, you pour fire on those machine gun nests. Keep their heads down. O'Malley, you stick to me like glue. Once the jammer is down, you get on that horn. Everyone else, grenades and smoke." Miller was shaking. Thorne grabbed him by the jacket. "Hey, you want to go home to Iowa? This is how you earn the ticket. Lock it in." Miller swallowed hard, nodded, and crept away into the darkness.
"Now!" Thorne screamed. He lobbed the grenade. It sailed through the air and landed directly under the tracks of the command vehicle. The explosion shattered the pre-dawn quiet, sending shrapnel tearing through the delicate antenna array. The humming noise died instantly. "Hit it! Hit it!" Thorne roared, rolling over the wall as the night erupted into chaos. From the left, the BAR opened up, a rhythmic chug, chug, chug that tore through the confused German infantry rushing out of the farmhouse. Green and red tracers crossed in the air like deadly distinct fireworks. The element of surprise was total but brief. "Fixer, the radio!" Thorne fired his Garand, dropping a soldier who was raising an MP-40. Ping! He ejected the clip, shoved in a fresh one, and kept firing. O'Malley was huddled behind the stone wall, the handset pressed to his ear. "Echo Base, this is Echo 4. Priority urgent. Do you copy?" Bullets chipped the stone inches from his face. "I have a signal. They can hear me." "Send the fire mission," Thorne yelled, popping up to suppress a group of Germans maneuvering to flank them. "Grid 449-221. Massive enemy concentration. Tanks, infantry." The Germans were recovering. The initial shock had worn off, and now the weight of their numbers was coming to bear. A machine gun opened up from the farmhouse window, chewing up the ground around Thorne. He felt a searing burn graze his cheek, a piece of stone shrapnel. "Coordinates sent," O'Malley screamed. "They say time on target is 40 seconds. They have 155mm howitzers ready." 40 seconds! Thorne looked around. They were pinned. Miller and Jackson on the left had gone silent. The German officer in the trench coat was rallying his men, pointing directly at Thorne's position. A turret on one of the smaller Panzer IV tanks began to rotate toward them with a mechanical whine. We need to move, Thorne grabbed O'Malley. Back to the woods. They scrambled back, crawling through the slush. But the Germans were aggressive. A squad of SS Grenadiers rushed the wall. Thorne shot two, but his rifle clicked empty. He drew his Colt 45, firing blindly. "Sarge, I'm hit!" O'Malley grunted, stumbling. He clutched his leg. Blood was dark against the white snow. Thorne didn't think. He grabbed O'Malley by the harness and dragged him. "I got you! Keep moving!" They reached the tree line, but the tank had a bead on them. The muzzle flash lit up the forest like a lightning strike. The shell impacted the stone wall they had just left, sending a shockwave that threw Thorne and O'Malley face first into the dirt. Thorne's ears were ringing. The world was spinning. He rolled over, gasping for air. The German infantry was advancing, bayonets fixed, silhouettes against the burning command track. There were too many of them. Thorne looked at his watch. 30 seconds had passed. "Where are they?" O'Malley wheezed, gripping his radio handset. "Sarge, come on, boys! Don't leave us hanging!" The German officer was standing over them now, pistol drawn. He looked down at Thorne with a sneer of cold triumph. He raised the Luger. Then a sound came from the sky. It wasn't the roar of engines. It was a whistling, a tearing of the air like canvas ripping, multiplied by 100. The German officer looked up, his expression shifting from triumph to absolute terror. Whoomp! Whoomp! Crack! The first shell landed right in the middle of the tank park, then the second, then the world dissolved. The American artillery barrage had arrived. It was a time-on-target mission, meaning shells from different batteries were timed to impact simultaneously. The ground shook so violently that Thorne bounced where he lay. The blast wave knocked the German officer off his feet. Thorne didn't hesitate. He scrambled up, adrenaline overriding his concussion, and dragged O'Malley deeper into the woods, away from the impact zone. Behind them, the ghost front was burning. The meticulous German timeline was shattered. Tanks were exploding as their ammunition cooked off. The infantry was scattered. The element of surprise was gone. Thorne pulled O'Malley into a ravine about 300 yards away and collapsed. They lay there for what felt like hours, listening to the symphony of destruction. As the sun finally broke over the horizon, the shelling stopped. The silence returned, but it was different now. It wasn't a heavy, menacing silence. It was the silence of a stopped clock. Miller crawled into the ravine 10 minutes later. He was pale, missing his helmet, and holding a bloodied arm, but he was alive. Jackson was with him. They had made it. "Did we do it, Sarge?" Miller asked, his voice trembling. "Did we stop 'em?" Thorne lit a cigarette, his hands finally shaking as the adrenaline crashed. He looked through the trees at the smoke rising from the valley. The German column was in ruins. The delay caused by the artillery would allow the 99th and the 2nd Infantry Divisions to dig in. The Battle of the Bulge would still happen. It would be a meat grinder, but the breakthrough, the race to Antwerp, had been strangled in its crib. "Yeah, kid," Thorne said, exhaling a plume of smoke that mixed with the icy air. O'Malley adjusted his radio, listening to the chatter coming through the headset. "Sarge," he said, a grin breaking through the grime on his face. "HQ sends their regards. They want to know who authorized a fire mission on a quiet sector." Thorne looked up at the gray sky where the distant hum of P-47 Thunderbolts could now be heard.